here. I'm the founding pastor of One Church in Chandler, Arizona. You can check us out at onechurch.com. And One Church is a fairly unique animal in the church world, I think, in general, and definitely in our area. And that's because we are a non-denominational church, and we use contemporary guitar and drums, worship music, and we're a church with progressive theology. And that's a combination that is fairly rare in our area, at least. And I've found that there are a lot of people around the country who are looking for a church like that, but they're having a difficult time finding one. I know they exist, but I think there need to be a lot more of them. But we started One Church in March of 2012, and the main reason was that essentially we wanted a church we could raise our son in. And that's only partially a joke. And we wanted a church that we could sign off on. That would be a church like the one I described. And in 2009, a survey was taken by I believe the American Religious Identification Survey. And they asked 18 to 29-year-olds about their religious affiliation. And they discovered that between 1990 and 2008, the percentage of young adults in America who claimed no faith had doubled. And in 2008, it was 22%. Almost a quarter of young adults in the United States, when asked, what faith they adhere to, answer none. And so they became known as the nuns. And this is what really got me. 73% of the nuns, people who claim no faith, grew up in church. And when asked, the number one reason they gave for why they walked away from their faith was that no one would engage them in their questions and doubts. So essentially, they became old enough to drive. And by that time, they had developed questions that they couldn't find answers to. And to be honest, I didn't need a survey to tell me that, because that was my world. My friends felt that way, and I felt that way. I went through a crisis of faith in my 20s where I questioned everything that I had been taught, and it was very painful. It was a painful, emotional journey. If you've ever been through something like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so my wife and I wanted to start a new church that could be a safe place for people with sincere questions and doubts, to explore those and to engage with one another and to engage with pastors and theology and influential leaders and wrestle thoughtfully with their faith. We have three values in One Church, and the first one is One Church is a safe place to express your questions and doubts. Now, One Church is a non-denominational church, not because we have something against denominations or we don't believe in denominations. That's not it at all. It's a non-denominational church because my wife and I were blessed with a fundraising experience that enabled us to start a non-denominational church. By God's grace, we were able to raise about $150,000 in startup funds, and we raised funds from people we knew in our churches individually, and basically people we'd invited to our wedding. When they came to our wedding, they didn't know they would get a fundraising letter from us someday, and we didn't know it either, because we didn't know at that time that we were going to plant the church. But we just raised funds from people who know us and care about us and who believed in the vision of One Church. And we were blessed with enough, startup money to cover our expenses to launch the church. And frankly, it was probably more startup funding than a lot of denominations would have offered. And I have friends in denominations, and I think there are strengths and weaknesses to both, denominational and non-denominational churches. But if I'm going to be totally honest, another reason for starting a non-denominational church is that a lot of denominations, I think right now, are struggling with how to support entrepreneurial, innovative, church planters who want to start communities of faith to reach the nuns and other parts of the population who are unreached. But a lot of denominations unintentionally have barriers that make it harder to plant a church, and church planting is already hard enough. Now, that's not true of all denominations. Again, I don't want to be unfair, but in our experience, as we did look around, we did have some conversations. We just felt that we would be better off starting a non-denominational church. And so now we're governed as a nonprofit. We have articles of incorporation, bylaws. We have a board. They're not elders for life. They're board members with rotating terms and term limits to help us govern ourselves as responsibly as we can with the utmost of integrity. But I'm making this video in December of 2014, so the church is a little under 2 years old. In the 22 months it's been since we launched one church, we grew to 200 people in 1 year. I could tell you stories that would bring tears to your eyes about people who had given up on faith, they had given up on church, they pretty much had chucked their religious experience and now have a new lease on faith. And they've been able to wrestle with their faith in a way that helps them to follow Jesus and be intellectually honest. And I find that once people feel permission to wrestle with their questions and doubts, and we don't always arrive at the same answers, that's extremely important. But I found that once people have that permission and then they're able to think through their questions and doubts, the gospel truly becomes good news to them. It feels like good news. If something's really good news, it feels like it. You don't have to tell people it's good news. Like, wait, I've got good news. Why aren't you smiling? It automatically feels like good news. And I've seen it time and time again now. And so many people I love who are part of our church community, I'm picturing their faces right now. And thinking of things, of comments they've made where, if it weren't for this church, I wouldn't be a Christian. There's really no other church I could connect with. And it's been one of the most fulfilling experiences of our lives. And if God is calling you to start a new community of faith, a new expression of the body of Christ in your context, I pray blessings on you. And may you live into the calling that God has given to you, whatever that looks like. It may not look anything like one church, but may you live into the calling that God has given to you, and may you experience the gospel as good news.